When a ship won't sail, but it also won't sink, there's only one option left: to break it down into a hot mess of cold steel. It's hard work, and dangerous too, but in the sea of stars, the dead don't get buried, they get burned. Hardspace Shipbreaker is a puzzle and simulation game. You play as a space roughneck whose job is to salvage and tear apart various derelict spaceships in order to break them down for component pieces that can be smelted or forged or sold. The game is arbitrarily divided into a series of open-ended missions. Each mission begins with you selecting a spaceship to salvage and then being transported to the orbital docking bay. In this zero-gravity environment, you're free to move in any direction and examine the ship from all sides. Your goal is to use your high-powered laser cutter to pick apart the ship into manageable chunks that can then be salvaged. Now, while you have the freedom to cut basically whatever you want, being careless with your laser beam around fuel lines or power cores can result in collateral damage. Destroying sections of a ship or cutting them into too many pieces means that they can only be sold for scrap, so you earn more money and more points if you can collect more parts intact. After 15 minutes, your work shift will automatically end, and you'll get a payout based on how much you were able to collect. Meeting salvage milestones will also reward you with upgrade points, which you can use to purchase improvements for your tools and equipment. As you gain proficiency, your Shipbreaker rank will also increase. This will unlock additional ships of larger sizes with more salvageable materials, but also increases the hazard of your missions. These larger ships have more subsystems as well as more volatile components, such as fuel, coolant, and electrical wiring. Now, as I said before, Shipbreaker is basically a puzzle game, but one with kind of a novel approach. Unlike most puzzle games where your goal is to slowly add pieces and increase complexity, Shipbreaker is more entropic. Your objective is to take these large 3D modeled spaceships, identify their hazards, connecting points, and structural weaknesses, and then break them down into component pieces. And while that sounds simple, there is some challenge to it. As mentioned before, fuel lines and power conduits are often interconnected, so cutting too carelessly can have disastrous consequences. Part of what makes this manageable is the game's physics engine. All of the ships and their parts have weight and inertia, which you can manipulate with your handy-dandy gravity gun. And being able to do so in a zero-G environment is very convenient because it gives you a lot of control over positioning and direction. The game's visual design is also very strong. Things like cut points, computer consoles, and fuel lines all have a consistent look no matter what ship they're a part of. Also, your reticle provides a pop-up for whatever you're looking at, making it very easy to identify materials, hardness, weight, and even potential salvage value. Now, to be honest, it's kind of hard to evaluate Shipbreaker. It's an unconventional game that doesn't exactly fall into any traditional categories. The best you can really do is just lump it into that open-ended simulation genre. Still, I did have a lot of fun with Shipbreaker. It's basically a puzzle game, and there's something relaxing, almost meditative, about taking a large, complex starship and identifying its core pieces so that you can then slice them apart with energy beams. That, combined with the progression system of slowly improving your tools and unlocking new ships and new challenges, made it a great game to play for short 15-minute sessions. There are even sub-objectives such as salvaging specific types of equipment or collecting data logs that you can work to over the course of your career. The game even includes a campaign mode to help contextualize some of your long-term goals.
From among thousands of candidates to join the Lynx family. This is more than just a job. It's an opportunity.
But even I have to admit that the game can be tedious. However, I think that's sort of by design. Slowly identifying each component that you come across, picking pieces apart so that you don't actually send something to the furnace when you should be sending it to the salvage barge. This is a fundamental part of the game, and while you are free to be as methodical as you want, you don't have to salvage everything. The game's reward structures are tied around you being as efficient and effective as possible. Also, if you are interested in Shipbreaker, you should consider its movement system. Now, there are a number of shooters and flight simulators that feature the ability to move and look in whatever direction you want, but Shipbreaker has full unrestricted 3D movement. Not only can you move along the X, Y, and Z axis, but you can also pitch and rotate in any direction you want. And this is by design, so that you can orient yourself and your laser carver to make precise cuts on a ship's superstructure. It is one of the more interesting elements of the game's simulation, but I have to admit, even as a mediocre player, I did occasionally get turned around and confused. I can only imagine that for somebody with poor direction sense or motion sickness, this might actually be very frustrating. In the end, I would give Hardspace Shipbreaker 4 out of 4 stars. This is one of those rare games that delivers exactly the experience that it promises. Even so, my recommendation would only be a maybe. As a puzzle game, this is basically just a glorified version of those little children's toys where you have to get the right colored block into the right colored hole. Now, granted, in this experience, you do get to use a laser cutter to slice those blocks in half, so there is that. But it's more likely that I can see the movement system and repetitive nature of the game's mission frustrating people that are more interested in action titles. Alright, well, time's just about out. Thanks for listening. See you next time, Space Roughneck.